This Hangout on Air is live with Dr. Gene Bramall joining us. Always so dedicated and devoted. You folks don't even know half the story. And you know the whole story about the new swagalicious Matt Waldman. There's so much to talk about here week 2. So we're going to jump right in. Gene, Aaron Rodgers. I have 3 words ringing through my head right now. Sweep the leg. What practical fantasy advice, and I know you did a great job on your Twitter this morning, deducing the best that you can what is going on based on the new information we've gotten, if it is indeed true.
Yeah, the practical fantasy advice is it's hard to know exactly what to expect from Rodgers. Last week we saw him get progressively worse during the game from a medical standpoint, arguably, from a health standpoint, from a mobility standpoint, but not really lose much in the way of effectiveness. So I think, and you guys can talk to the specifics about how Green Bay may manage this situation, but this is not going to be anything close to the first half Aaron Rodgers to a healthy Aaron Rodgers. He's going to be limited in the pocket. You're likely to see him continue to have struggle throughout the game. He's going to have difficulty moving laterally. He's going to have difficulty coming up over that front foot and planting and throwing. And Rodgers, who has the ability to throw from multiple different platforms anyway, is probably the best quarterback in the league to work through this particular situation, but it's going to be difficult. And as you said, sweep the leg is in effect here. Mike Zimmer knows exactly what's going on. Arguably, he saw this happen with Sam Bradford. I think it's going to be a similar situation. Not to say that Rodgers isn't going to be able to walk, but I think the injuries are similar enough. The mobility situation is similar enough. You've got Everson Griffin on one side. You've got Danielle Hunter on the other. You've got folks coming up the middle and a secondary that's decent. So although Rodgers is arguably the best quarterback to be put in this situation for a chance to be successful and effective, we saw it against Chicago and Khalil Mack and Leonard Floyd and Eddie Goldman and others last week. It is a very, very difficult situation for Rodgers to try to play through today.
So, Gene, just for a data point, okay, I got a tweet, and I'm sorry, I don't have to handle the person. They said, I'm in a 2-quarterback league. I got offered Watson for Rodgers straight up. My reaction was, yes, take it, yes.
The only reason I'm hesitating is because I'm speculating based on kind of the tea leaves as I read them. My spidey senses were telling me Sunday night before I went to bed that maybe this isn't the ligament situation than we thought it was. You could see hints of it. You could see hints of a few different things on the video replay. But Rodgers, why would he say Sunday night and then repeat Monday morning that he had a cleanup procedure on this knee in 2015? That doesn't suggest a ligament injury. Those two things are not likely related. Also, he said that the medical staff, which we know is conservative in Green Bay, that they said he couldn't make this any worse, which doesn't sound like a ligament injury. Even a low-grade ligament injury, we've seen players play through, and no, maybe there's not a high likelihood of you making it worse, but if you've got an unstable knee joint in one direction or the other, and it gets hit in the same way, you can absolutely make it worse or have something else going on. So it sounded less like ligament and more like something else. What we don't know is, is this a cartilage issue? Is this a little bit of a bone bruise? When you hear it could take 6 to 8 weeks to recover, it sounds like something like that. But what we don't know is, what is Rodgers' threshold for pain going to be? Is there going to be some stiffness and swelling similar to what Sam Bradford went through last year? So I'm putting it in the same bucket from a speculative standpoint, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're dealing with a similar injury and that Rodgers may look good today. He looked better through the course of the week. He was able to walk through the locker room, which Sam Bradford really wasn't able to do. They're going to clear him to play, which suggests that they think that they can keep him upright enough in the pocket and he can protect himself enough on his own. So maybe this is a 1, 2, 3 week situation rather than a 4 to 6 and hope situation like it was for Sam Bradford. So if you have to make a decision in this moment, yes, the odds that Deshaun Watson is healthier than Aaron Rodgers over the next 6 to 8 weeks are high. But if we see Rodgers maneuver around the pocket well enough, Green Bay put together a reasonable game plan and successful game plan with Rodgers against Minnesota, then maybe a limited Rodgers with the knee issue will look like a limited Aaron Rodgers with the calf and hamstring problems that he's played through in the past where he couldn't get outside the pocket at all but was effective. The problem is this is the front leg. We don't exactly know what it looks like. So yes, if you are risk averse, I would probably recommend taking Watson over Rodgers because you have a sense of what you're going to get for the next month or so. But you might have a little bit of buyer's remorse later this afternoon. It's just really hard to know until we see how he moves around the pocket.
And I read that as it's still within the range of outcomes that it's going to be okay if you have Aaron Rodgers. It's going to be okay if you have. I mean, it's in the range of outcomes.
And maybe he leaves the pocket jams that left leg into the ground.
Right.
Whatever this bent knee with compression injury is aggravated. He can't finish the game because he can't walk. And then the Packers medical staff say, look, we're going to do what we usually do. We're going to do what we've done with Jermichael Finley and Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb and Rodgers himself with his collarbone injury, and we are going to shut you down until you can absolutely protect yourself in the pocket. That is within the range of outcomes today, too, and it's really difficult to know, other than the only really piece of information we got is he walked through the locker room on Friday without crutches. Good sign. They allowed him to practice on Saturday. Good sign. There's no reports overnight or this morning that that didn't go well and that he showed up today limping and not able to play. Would we hear about that? I don't know. So those are all signs that suggest this is a more positive situation, be it ligament, cartilage, bone, whatever it is. But I think that's the if you're looking for a comp, I think that's the most reasonable comp in the last 2 or 3 years.
And really quick before I pass this off to Matt, Devontae Adams' shoulder, aside from this stuff with Rodgers, just that as affecting his outlook.
Yeah, he returned to play last week after injuring the shoulder, caught a touchdown pass, looked pretty good doing so, wasn't shying away from the ball. We know that those injuries can be a little bit more difficult as the week goes along. Returned to practice on Thursday, felt good enough to continue to practice on Friday. Very optimistic in the locker room. As we saw with Randall Cobb, who had a similar injury in the past, assuming it's one of these AC sprains up here. Always a chance of aggravation during the game, but he's going into the game with every expectation that he should be able to see his usual workload.
Matt, do you have any Packers decisions to make on your teams today?
Other than Jamal Williams as maybe a running back 2 or running back 3, no. And
what are you doing with Williams? And what are you doing with Williams?
I'm not even using him at all.
So is that at least an indicator of how you would lean if you had to decide between Rodgers and a viable option, or Adams and a viable option, or Cobb and a viable option, or Graham?
No. Actually, I do have some Graham shares, and I'm starting Graham. And I just look at it because Minnesota can be weak against the tight end because of all that blitzing that they do. And you saw what George Kittle was able to do against them last week. And while George Kittle and Jimmy Graham have different types of games, it's still one of those things where Minnesota, Green Bay still spreads the field like a lot of teams do nowadays, and that makes it easier on the quarterback because you're basically creating mismatches against a secondary that are in a quick game. There's a lot of quick game in the NFL, so Rodgers doesn't have to drop back and buy as much time with those types of things.
Okay, so let's play a little, Matt. Let's play a little Rodgers, or even though you don't have any Rodgers, like Rodgers or Jimmy Garoppolo against Detroit.
Jimmy Garoppolo.
Okay, like Rodgers or I mean, this one's even easier. Like, Rodgers or Tyrod Taylor at Cleveland. I mean, at New Orleans.
I would probably still take Rodgers in this particular case.
Rodgers or Russell Wilson tomorrow night against Chicago.
Russell Wilson.
Okay, so I mean, it sounds like, and I have Rodgers around quarterback 15 or so. So like Garoppolo is one of those spots, like around quarterback 10, quarterback 12.
That's kind of where I have him. Yeah.
Yeah. So the point is, like, there are some players that, and I'm worried about Rodgers leaving the game early and Rodgers being ineffective. And I do think the Zimmer is going to take the aggressive angle on this. It's the NFL. It's your division rival. I mean, why would you take a 15-yard penalty to maybe shake that knee up? Well,
I don't know about that, but if you want to win,
yeah. Well,
you are going to pressure Rodgers and try to get him out of the pocket.
Yeah,
you have to make him uncomfortable around.
I'm not saying intent to injure. I'm just saying that if you play reckless with, reckless abandon to whether
you want bodies around him in the pocket. He
Yeah.
needs to be uncomfortable today, and it should be easy to do.
It should be. Speaking of uncomfortable, Gene, I suppose there's a reasonable angle on the Marcus Mariota situation, which is like, does it even matter? Does it even matter if his elbow's good? Does it matter if both quarterbacks play? Does it matter if Blaine Gabbert starts? Does it matter? But even it's assumed for a second it does matter. What do we know about Marcus Mariota?
I think it's pretty clear now that what happened was he took a blow to the inside of his elbow, and that funny bone nerve that you have right in there, when it gets smacked, everybody knows what that feels like. You wake up in the morning and this finger, the pinky finger, and part of this finger is a little bit numb, and it takes a few minutes to come back. But this is the equivalent of, it's not kind of a stretching injury like a stinger, but any sort of nerve injury like this, be it contusion or stretch or whatever, if it heals within the first few minutes, if those symptoms go away, you're good to go. Players return from stingers all the time. You return from bone contusions, see all that, or nerve, you see that all the time. But the longer those symptoms last, it becomes a little bit more of a concerning injury. Now, is the injury to the nerve? Is it to some of the surrounding tissue, and it's continuing to put pressure on the nerve with swelling and not allowing it to recover? whatever it is, the fact that a week later he's still having symptoms and they're worried about grip strength tells you that he's not healthy. It is much more of a week-to-week situation than day-to-day. Why would you, if Blaine Gabbert is an option, if you don't think Marcus Mariota can grip the ball, why is he an option at all? Why are you going to split time with these guys? So unless they've been fooling us all along, and I think that's unlikely because he hasn't been practicing, that I think there's a good chance that Mariota doesn't start today. He may not play all that much. He may give it a go and find out that his hand just isn't where he needs it to be. And if that's the case, this could be 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks rather than just a few days here. So we're going to get more information on Mariota as the day goes along as well. But I wouldn't be very optimistic about him, probably, period. We can talk about the offensive line issues as well, but lots of stuff.
Did you get a phone call from Tennessee last night, Gene, asking you to play right tackle? I did. I couldn't take it, though.
Yeah, I'm not going there. There's some sort of bad karma happening in that locker room. Hopefully Dennis Kelly is okay and you get hospitalized with a virus. That could be lots of different things going on. With a little bit of luck, that just means he's got some sort of stomach bug, but it doesn't feel that way. So top 3 tackles are out. Conklin, they're hoping to get back soon. Taylor Lewan wasn't available at all this week with a concussion. So this is going to be an ongoing issue. We may be talking about the same thing next week.
Yeah, Jacksonville, by the way, their opponent next week. So, Matt, who's the best play this week? Corey Davis, Dion Lewis, or the Houston defense?
I think Dion Lewis is probably still the best play, but it might be an edge over the Houston Texans defense just a little bit.
Is that at least somewhat based on a belief that Matt LaFleur won't just lay down and play dead and will try to rub 2 sticks together with Blaine Gabbert or Gabbert Mariota or Abbert and use the short passing game and just be resourceful in a very tough situation?
It's just kind of like one of those things where you just rely on a government agency when it's time to clean something up or to do what needs to be done. It may be really late after the event or or after the disaster or whatever's going on, but you're still going to have the job eventually get done here, and there's going to be a lot of work to be done there. And I think Dion Lewis is part of that cleanup crew at the end, where he may have 3 points for 3 quarters, and then in the final 8 minutes of the game, he's going to collect 3/4 of his points.
So if you were weighing Matt Dion Lewis against, well, for instance, the 2 injury fill-in backs, Tevin Coleman and TJ Yeldon, any clear separation between those 3?
Yeah, I think that basically in a PPR league or standard, I'd still probably take Yeldon, then Coleman, and then go Lewis in that order.
Yeah, and these guys are grouped very close in my rankings, which is why I ask you. It's not easy. Speaking of this game, Gene, real quick, DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller, any reason to hesitate starting them? I mean, within the bounds of who you would weigh them against coming into the week with their injury situations.
Hopkins, probably not. Hopkins seems like he's on the injury report frequently in some limited fashion, but practices most of the week and doesn't look limited at all, with a variety of soft tissue type injuries. Fuller seemed like he was close last week and then still had some limited practice this week, never really returned to a full practice and is still considered questionable. I think it's not a good thing, but the Texans are definitely without Kiki Kuti today with his hamstring injury. So with them not bringing him along, it stands to reason that they think Fuller is likely to be active. But we're still within the window of time where aggravated injuries can occur. They seem like they still want to check him out during pregame warmups. So I'd be a little bit nervous about him. It's possible that he sees a little bit more limited time or targets than we'd expect, but Hopkins should be fine.
Matt, what will you be watching for today as indicators that Deshaun Watson is going to be okay? Or maybe your answer is, I never thought he wasn't going to be okay, or I see things that no matter what he does today against Tennessee, I'm still hesitant about.
I think he's okay. I just think that it just depends on if you're defining okay as great. I think he'll be better than last week, because I'd be surprised if I'd be surprised if Tennessee is as successful as Green Bay at being able to say, we're gonna make you run the ball and dare you and take away the deep ball. And Houston didn't seem to want to respond to that. They just kept trying to throw the ball deeper. But I don't think that Tennessee has the defense with the discipline or the personnel to be able to stop Watson and Houston's game plan the way that they had it in the past. And I think also that you'll see them have more success running the ball on a level where I think that Tennessee's defense panics a little bit more, which does create more open passing lanes. Because New England also was able to rush the passer pretty well last week, and I'm just I'm just not sure that Tennessee's going to have the guns to do this.
Yeah, 6 degrees of Jacksonville separation. Let's stick with New England, Gene. We are back at that crossroads. We always seem to be back with a Bill Belichick backfield where it feels like we have to throw our hands in the air and say, I don't know. Can you help, or is that actually the correct diagnosis of the New England backfield this week?
No, I've never been able to help that particular issue, and I'm not going to be able to help today. What I can tell you is I think Rex Burkhead is going to play. They would not have let him get on the plane to Jacksonville if he hadn't been cleared for contact. They're not going to seek out an independent neurologist on Saturday night in Jacksonville when they have multiple of them there in New England, probably to go by. So there's every reason to suspect he's going to play. And again, concussions being what they are, one thing they are not is usually an immediate concern like a hamstring injury for an aggravation during the game. Michelle was also on the plane. He is going to be active this week. I don't see any reason to suspect that's not the case. Last week, Bill Belichick said he wasn't game ready. This week said he was making progress from day to day. He seemed to be reacting well to what was going on. But the distribution of touches is going to be interesting. As we said last week, that they want Michelle to have a big role in this offense, given where they drafted him, knowing the conditions that he had with his knee coming in. That's what they wanted, but they didn't see that during the preseason, so it's not likely they're going to give him a big role in week one unless there's nobody else in the backfield to take some of those snaps. James White's been effective. They like Rex Burkhead, as do we, out there as well. So I don't think we're going to see a ton from Sony Michel today, but this could get really interesting next week if Michel comes in for 15 to 20 snaps, 8 to 10 touches, and looks more effective than the rest of the backfield does.
Next week they get Detroit. Matt Patricia. So Matt, speaking of Matt, are you dabbling in the New England backfield against Jacksonville? It sure seems like they should be throwing to the running backs a lot today.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem that way, that's for sure. And I think that I'm not really dabbling against New England. I mean, against the Jaguars defense really at this point. I mean,
Chris Hogan off the board too. You're playing, Brandon Marshall and Dante Pettis and Nelson Aguilar and whatever.
Yeah,
if you have a name that has a pulse at wide receiver, you're probably playing them over Hogan this week.
Yeah, with a good matchup, a pulse with a good matchup, I'll give a shot to, because I mean, at this stage, I mean, you could go with Hogan, you can go with those types of things, but this just feels like that game where, like, if you bet on Philip Dorsett or you bet on Hogan, you're going to wind up with Cordero Patterson having 120 yards and 2 touchdowns, and it's going to be a who'da thunk. It's going to be a who'da thunk kind of game where you don't know who's going to be who that player is. I mean, the only player I've really banked on in New England this year at ever is like Sony Michel at a ridiculously low price, and just decide, let me wait and see what's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That if you do have some fascination with Michelle before the games kick off today, as Dr. Gene laid out, 15, 20 snaps, 5, 8, 10 touches. Either the cat's going to be out of the bag, and people with Michelle are going to say, "I'm not letting him go," or he won't pop. But this is a moment, a window to trade for him. Gene, we did see Brandon Wild get called up from the practice squad for the Jags. Very unlikely Leonard Fournette's going to play, but was just talking about it. Tennessee, banged up quarterbacks, et cetera, et cetera. Boy, that's going to be a good matchup for whoever starts at running back at Jacksonville, based on what where we at with Fournette and this hamstring injury.
Yeah, it looked unlikely all week. They didn't even want to test him until Friday, and then they said he was running pretty hard, but to not allow him to practice when that happened last year with the ankle things, he generally did not play. And there's been no optimism from anybody, local, national, what have you, about Fournette playing today. And then they activated Wilds. TJ Yeldon was limited on Friday with a little bit of an ankle thing, but I think that's more to do with, he probably has always had, we know he's had ankle issues, a little bit of a nagging thing, and they knew that Fournette wasn't going to play. They wanted no chances at all with putting him through too much of a practice on Friday. That's the reason for that. He's not listed on the game status report, so I don't think this Wilds situation has anything to do with Yeldon. So what you hope is that the Jaguars have sort of been telling us the truth all along, and this is just a 1-week precautionary situation for Fournette, and it doesn't become a little bit more of a week-to-week deal. We're not going to know that until after the game, potentially Monday press conference or Wednesday practice participation, but I certainly don't expect Fournette to play today, and hopefully there's not too much going on with Yeldon's ankle.
So Matt, let's step back from the fantasy angle, although every football angle intersects with some fantasy angle, and talk about this unbelievably fascinating game. You know, it's week 2, so we're all overwhelmed. Football's back. We're swimming around in the ocean, but wow, a New England Jacksonville rematch after a very memorable game. This one's going to be in Jacksonville. And I guess the fantasy implications on the Jacksonville side come back to, and I believe you laid it out, Yeldon, Coleman, Lewis in those three. So you have some affinity for Yeldon, and I think you're right too. It's good running ability. This offensive line has Andrew Norwell now, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what we saw last year was Jacksonville had the right game plan on both sides of the ball, jumped out to a lead, went into a shell, and lost the game because of it. And I'm not asking you to necessarily play psychiatrist here, but do we think that Jacksonville will show that they learned something in this game? And if they do, does that mean maybe Keelan Cole, maybe D.D. Westbrook, maybe they'll stick with the pass? Or do you expect them to make the same mistakes and go overly conservative again when it matters?
It's a great question. I mean, I think that if you look at the way the NFL as a whole outside of Bill Belichick, then the answer is the latter, that they're going to make the same mistakes and do what they do because it's out of ego. And they're just kind of attached to their game plans and the way things are. And when somebody gives them evidence to the contrary, they sound dumb in the media trying to refute it. So that's one way of looking at it. But I think that the fact that the Jaguars are playing them so closely after what just happened that they are going to try and do it differently, and what may happen is either the players are not ready to be able to handle that type of execution and screw it up, and it becomes a huge loss for them trying to do it the way that they were supposed to do it, or it works out really well and they're able to get the job done. So I'm going to be more optimistic and say that they have learned and that they're gonna do that. It's just a matter of whether Blake Bortles is going to come up big enough to be able to do this. And I look at this team. I mean, defensively, they can certainly stop Tom Brady. So I think that there's enough there to say that this is going to be probably one of the more interesting games we've seen this month.
Gene, one more big injury situation to talk about, and then I know you have to get back to the many other. I was, by the way, folks, I was grilling Dr. Gene about the solar observatory shutdown because I have a suspicion that he's a secret government agent, but he wouldn't give up any goods. Gene, give up the goods on Devontae Freeman.
Does that make Cecil the alien that he handles at
This is another script that we need Five-ish to make the movie poster for. Right?
No more posters. I'm telling you, man. It's been a while, but I have had moms come into my office and ask me, I Googled you. I saw this picture. So, yeah, no. We love Five-ish, but please, no more.
Okay. We
no
do
more
love
Bushwick Gene and no more.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, that's the one that usually gets it. I saw this picture. You had your hat on sideways. They photoshopped you on somebody on a hospital bed. What's going on with that? It's like, it is my alter ego, but it is not secret agent.
That's as far as the secret identities go. So Devontae Freeman, because this is one of those situations, and one of the things I want to say about this Devontae Freeman thing, and kudos to you, Gene, as always, because you kept reporting where it seemed like, why does Dr. Gene keep saying this guy had surgery, this guy had surgery, this guy didn't have surgery, when we kept talking about Devontae Freeman? And the fact that he did not have surgery on the knee that was uncomfortable at the end of the year was actually a harbinger, an omen, I think, of this issue. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I'm over on Narrative Street. But regardless, 3 to 4 weeks, what can we deduce knowing these things about the condition of his knee?
I think he's. I don't think it's in the same situation as Aaron Rodgers, but I think we're probably in that time frame of injury. And I don't know whether or not this injury is related to the injury that he suffered at the end of last year and recovered and rehabbed from as the offseason went along. It could well be. There's an argument that could be a little bit of a cascade situation, but there really wasn't a specific report from Atlanta. This was ligament related, that it was structural related. And the play just before he left, it looked more like he just sort of had that knee hit the ground. And it was hard to tell, even on the all-22 angle, exactly what happened. But this is kind of what you'll see with some of these injuries where you're not exactly sure what it is, and it may not be ligament related, or he does have a little something that's been bothering him, where the team says he's okay, we think he's okay, and then we're not sure because they expect him to get better. And then whether it's an MRI later or he's just not recovering as quickly as you expected. This is what we see. So it would make you nervous to think that this is being termed a 2 to 4 week situation. The report this morning is that he's been rehabbing so strenuously that they hope that he's going to be able to get back sooner than that. But this is one of those injuries, the way they're describing it, where you can rehab as aggressively as you like, but it just takes some time to heal. And the underlying part of all this, whether it's related or not, is the knee injury that he had. And players generally don't like to have surgery. The medical staffs are really, we can go on that rabbit hole, but they have the player's best interest in mind. If they felt like surgery was the best option, I would assume that would have been something that was recommended for him for the PCL injury. It may have been that the MCL, the additional ligament that he had damaged, was just such a minor injury that it really didn't affect the stability of the knee at all. But we see these things with PCLs from time to time. We saw it with Brashad Perriman, had a little bit difficult recovery, and then eventually cropped up on him multiple times. And hopefully this is as simple as a little bit of a contusion in and around the knee for Freeman. It's not due to the structural integrity and stiffness versus looseness of the knee as that PCL healed. And then when we do get past the point where the knee is no longer bothering from a pain standpoint, this isn't going to be an ongoing thing. What we don't want to hear is after 2 or 3 weeks that he's struggling to recover, that they are concerned about the structural integrity of the knee, and then we have to have surgery at some point, whether that's now or after the season, that sort of stuff. I don't think that ship is entirely sailed yet, but I really, like I said, there's no way to know whether or not there was looseness in the knee that made it more likely for him to have a bone injury in this particular situation. And I don't think I would automatically say when he's recovered from this one, he's at immediate risk of having a recurrent bone injury again for the same reason in the week, 2 weeks, month after he returns this time. So I'm hoping we get a little bit more information about this as the week progresses or as the rehab continues. But for now, I'm leaning more towards the over on this. I think we're looking at 4 weeks instead of 2 to 4, and it could be a little bit longer than that. Hopefully that's not the case, but this is a situation where they're going to want him recovered before they allow him to come back.
Doc, we always appreciate you and your wisdom and your calming effect.
Was I calming this morning? I don't know if I was calming about Freeman or Fournette or Mariota or Rodgers.
Those are all situations.
It's the pen you use on the alien.
Conspiracy theories abound.
So feel free to stick around as long as you may please, but I also know that you have other things calling. Matt, let's go to this Atlanta-Carolina game. First, briefly, because these are some things to file away, because by the end of the day, Matt, we might be talking about Ito Smith and Brian Hill. So go back to your RSP files, and if people are doing some preemptive pickups, deeper leagues, like should I pick up Ito Smith, or how much should I pay attention to Brian Hill with them now one injury away from a larger role in the Falcons' backfield?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, Ito Smith is more of your scat back, and he was their recent draft pick. And he's a guy that has really good quickness. He can return punts. He can catch the ball. He was paired in the backfield with Jalen Richard at Southern Miss. And you can see, and they were similar backs. Jalen Richard, I thought, was the better of the two backs. And Smith really did have a fairly tight competition this summer with Malik Williams and Justin Crawford out of West Virginia. He's a little more mistake prone than what, even in college, I thought that he was a little bit more mistake prone and a little bit more immature in terms of his ability to use footwork to be able to access running lanes. So I think that he's kind of more of a boom bust player. If he starts out well, though, they might buy into him because of that draft capital. On the other hand, Brian Hill was a pick 2 years ago or last year for the Atlanta Falcons, didn't make the roster, even though there were some moments where he looked pretty good. He was a bigger back, stronger back out of Wyoming, who runs, pretty hard and can push a pile and is kind of a guy who can carry a load for you. Cincinnati picked him up and he was okay. They picked him up and they had him during the season. And then I think either he got cut and put on the practice squad or and I think Atlanta signed him off the practice squad this year. And now it looks like he's going to get that opportunity. If I were to base it just what I saw on college tape, because the preseason tape didn't really show me much with either guy, I would say Brian Hill's the better longer play in this particular situation, but it's going to depend on the politics of draft capital, as we go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Gene, one more before we go. The MAC in Indy maybe back this week, a complicated situation, getting more complicated. But I suppose if there is somebody who's going to have lasting value in the Colts backfield, it would be Marlon Mack. Is he going to get a chance to show us that today?
Well, he fully practiced, and Frank Reich told folks that he looked good toward the end of the week and that he's making progress. Wouldn't confirm that he was going to be active. He just sort of said, I feel confident that if he's up, we're going to use him accordingly. And he used the word accordingly, and I don't know what that means. But my sense is that it means we know he's not fully healthy yet. We're not ready to put him in a full-time role yet. So I don't necessarily see him getting more than 10 to 12 touches, depending on how Jordan Wilkins and Nyheim Hines are playing. So I expect him to be active. I think we're going to see him play a little bit. If he looks really good and is more effective than the other two backs, he may play a little bit longer, but expect a limited role today and hopefully gets through the game without any setbacks. And that'll be 2 weeks of practice in a game. And then we should be, back to however Indianapolis chooses to use that backfield moving forward.
Similar to the Sony Michel situation. If you
Correct.
coveted him and you missed out, this is your chance to maybe get a discount because we will likely get to see what he can do, and maybe you won't get a chance to get him. So, Matt, let's go to that Indianapolis-Washington game. First, let's talk on the Indy side. Here's a good Aaron Rodgers war. Aaron Rodgers or Andrew Luck?
Andrew Luck begrudgingly, just because I just think that Andrew Luck has just as much of a chance of getting hurt as Andrew Luck does as Aaron Rodgers does, mainly because of the beating that he's going to take. And Aaron Rodgers actually has a better offensive line. It's just the fact that Luck is healthier, so you're going to have to go with the healthier guy.
Yeah, Anthony Costanzo is going to be out again. He had a setback, and Washington gets to Green Bay next week too. So Washington's going to get Luck and then Rodgers, maybe in semi-compromised positions. What about downstream from Luck? Obviously, or you can tell me no, not obviously, but Doyle and Ebron are, with the state of the tight end position, both tight end ones. Like if you have them, unless you have an obvious play over them, they're in your lineup.
Yeah, I rate both of those guys as, even though Ebron had a big game last week, I would look at this as these are guys in your 9 to 12 range, 9 to 15 range. So yeah, you can start them, but if you have an established starter, go with the established guy.
On the Washington side, should we treat Adrian Peterson as an established starter now? Is he one of those guys that on your first pass through your lineup, you check the check mark beside him, and then maybe you look and see like, oh, I have TJ Yeldon, I'm going to think about him. I have Tevin Coleman. For me, Peterson is clearly ahead of that Coleman, Yeldon, Lewis group we talked about. Same?
Yeah, outside of the top 5 against Indianapolis, you might as well treat him like he's almost a top 5 back.
It's so wild because, and I get it, upside down drafting, do the opposite zero running back. We don't want to cherry pick, but really, if you zeroed in on James Conner and Adrian Peterson, you'd be just fine right now.
Yeah, but they're guys that, whether you were upside down or whether you were right side up,
you should have been targeting them. Yeah,
those are guys you get after the 10th round. After the 10th round, pretty much you're picking for value. They're the same rules. So
yeah, it's amazing. In the Washington passing game, it is a great matchup against Indy. Aaron Rodgers, Smith over Aaron Rodgers or Smith over Andrew Luck seems pretty simple to me. What about Jordan Reed's a slam dunk start? What about Chris Thompson? And is there anybody else from the Washington passing game that you might nudge up a little bit? I know Paul Richardson had that shoulder thing late in the week, and he maybe would have been interesting against Indianapolis because Washington didn't really get tested on offense. We didn't even really see them have to open up the playbook against Arizona last week.
No, all they opened up was they dusted off every particular running play that they could run, with Thompson and Peterson. It was just like, oh, Deion Buchanan, sure, this is going to be fun. We're going to wipe the mat with these linebackers that they have in Arizona, or what they call linebackers in terms of their size. The ish defense. That's basically what went on there. And so when you look at this particular situation, Josh Doctson certainly is that big upside play, but he's unreliable in terms of what kind of volume that you'd expect. So I think Jamison Crowder is your safest bet. And then after that, your second safest bet might well be Vernon Davis. If when you look at, beyond Jordan Reed, because of the fact that they do a lot of play action. He's used a lot in the screen game. They may, they showed these different types of screens with Vernon Davis as the lead blocker, where now they might, look to that screen and then run Vernon Davis on the wheel route or up the seam or on a deep crossing route. And next thing you know, he's wide open, working through there. So I think Chris Thompson and Adrian Peterson are absolutely the plays. Jordan Reed is obviously the play. That's your third. And then your fourth, really, if you're looking for a fourth Washington player, it's going to be Jamison Crowder. And then beyond that, it's all speculative.
Now, this week, I did some polls, Matt, to try to just gauge folks' opinion on some players. I was probing about, is it a sell high moment for David Johnson and Ezekiel Elliott? How do they see them? And I asked, are you going to start LaShawn McCoy this week? And the options were yes, no, and laugh, cry. Just which of those three options would you pick if you had to make a choice about McCoy this week?
It would be laugh cry, I think, at this point, just because, I'm in terms of, we won't get into the details of that case, but I would say that it made sense to me all along that he would probably get cleared of these charges based on what I've read into and knowing what I know a little bit of this area of town, and it's not far from where I live. What was going on, and it's rare that I would take the side of the player, but this might be one of those. In terms of the inside of the victim in a case like this, right. I'd go against them. But in this particular situation, I would say that McCoy, unfortunately, has an offensive line that maybe, if you're looking at, if we're going to just kind of make light of the situation, and I probably shouldn't, it's going to be tasteless, but I'm going to do it ananyway at the risk. I apologize in advance. Is that
this is where I'm supposed to be responsible for you?
Is that if you did believe that he did the wrongdoing that he did, that maybe the judge, maybe the police just decided, what, with that offensive line,
you have to play for Buffalo. Exactly.
You gotta,
you're sentenced to playing for Buffalo in 2018
because your career is going to be over in in 2 weeks with this offensive line. But I mean, it's going to be a tough situation for him to find running room as great of a back that LaShawn McCoy is, and with that situation, and then with Allen, you look at that scenario and it's like, on the one hand, if Allen plays to his very best behavior, you could have that Peyton Manning, Marshall Faulk thing going on from like nearly 19, 20 years ago, where Faulk was catching every single pass from Manning, and had close to 90 receptions that year or over. And I think that may happen with McCoy later in games, but I just don't think that Allen is as intelligent or as skilled of a quarterback as Peyton Manning was in the second half of the season, or even in the first half when he was absolutely awful for Indianapolis. So I would stay away from McCoy until we start to see signs of life.
By the way, coming across the wire right now, that Houston defense, very cheap in DFS this week. Still a great play, but without Jadeveon Clowney this week. So it's like the Steelers.
He's in Gene's pen.
Yeah, well, and it's like the Steelers offense. Like, they could never get Brown, Bryant, Bell, and Ben on the same week, and it's going to be the same thing with this Houston defense. They're never going to get everybody primed. Now they have the Honey Badger in there too. So on the other side of that, because you were talking about Josh Allen, and I had a good discussion with Frank Schwab. Love you, Frank. About and it has been plus expected value to play these big overreaction underdogs. One of them this week is Arizona. One of them this week is Buffalo. Buffalo getting 7.5 points at home, I think, is the total. And it's a quarterback change. And somebody got into my mentions, I can't remember who, and made the point that if you that they're supposed to be, the theory is, it might have been Scott Pianowski. Like, you bet on the team that has the new quarterback. And you mentioned Josh Allen, that new quarterback.
Yeah, betting on the team and actually playing the guy in your fantasy roster are two very different things.
I hear you. So there's one script, because we watched Baltimore not really look like that good of a team against Cincinnati on Thursday night, which makes you wonder, well, what happened last week whenever Buffalo came to Baltimore? And you may, in turn, think it's not going to go that different, even though it's at Buffalo with the Chargers, and which then, in turn, would make you say, well, I'm more inclined to play Austin Eckler. I'm more inclined to play a Tyrell Williams or a Mike Williams with Travis Benjamin likely out. I'm more inclined maybe to even go down to Antonio Gates. I'm more inclined to make some hard calls and maybe play Phillip Rivers over everybody except the likes of, Drew Brees and Patrick Mahomes. So when you're thinking about your Chargers today, are you thinking about it like somewhat of a replay of week one? Or are you thinking more in that like pendulum swing back potentially kind of game?
No, I'm not thinking pendulum at all. That pendulum is stuck. It got stabbed into something, in the wall, and it is not coming back. I definitely think that the Chargers are must plays this week, and maybe Buffalo figures out a way to win it because Travis Benjamin drops another 3 balls, Terrell Williams drops another ball, and there's some mistakes that Phillip Rivers makes as a result of that, and there's some interception returns for touchdowns and things like that. But the Chargers are going to score lots of points, and the Bills, if they win this game, it's going to be defense and special teams, and maybe one play where Buffalo fans desperately say, "I told you that Josh Allen, he's got it. It's just got to develop." And you're going to get some of those plays,
Maybe it'll be interesting to go back and watch. Another one of the teams that got into the 40s in week 1 was the Jets. And I think that because it happened on Monday and because we haven't had a lot of chance to talk about it, that we haven't given nearly enough ink time pub to how Quincy Enunwa could be one of the keys to your fantasy season.
Yeah.
With only 21 targets, he had 6 catches, over 60 yards, a touchdown, and there's no reading between the lines. It was right out there on the front page that the Jets made a point of emphasis of Enunwa in the offense. They schemed to get him the ball in the same way you scheme to get the ball to your best players. Does that mean that we've corrected now? Maybe you got Enunwa round 15. Maybe you got him off of the waiver wire. But now do you treat him like someone that you drafted, I don't know, Matt, like in the 4th, 5th, 6th round when you're setting your lineup?
Yes, you do, because this was a case about, it was never a case about Enunwa's talent. It was the case of, is he going to be healthy enough from the neck injury, and where the Jets quarterback's going to play well, and which quarterback was it going to be? And when they chose the rookie over 2 veterans, you basically had to continue to drop him down because you don't really know what you're going to get with Sam Darnold early. And we still may have a little bit of a correction with Enunwa because of Darnold, in the sense that Detroit's coaching staff decided that they weren't going to change the signals for Matthew Stafford with the line calls. So the New York Jets defense pretty much scored multiple touchdowns in that game. They had to help out. Now, Darnold played well early and they padded a lead, but Detroit's defense has never been good either. Detroit's defense for the past 5 years, I can tune in the preseason and listen to Chris Spielman say, well, there they are, not being able to understand how to make a good run fit. They're not playing gap sound defense, and they just give up run after run after run that are big plays like that. And when you can run on a team like that, it's one of the worst things that can happen to a defense. And that defense gives up big plays. I don't care if your name is Darius Slay and you can cover, elite wide receivers. If the rest of your team does what it does, you're in trouble. And so that's what the Jets ended up in a great situation last week. And when they play a defense and a coaching staff that has some experience and some savvy, you're going to that's when it's going to be a bigger test for Darnold. And I think that's kind of what we're going to see down the line. But Enunwa himself as a player, I mean, I know they like to say, oh, he's like a halfback, but he plays wide receiver. He's kind of he looks like Terrell Owens. If you look at his build, he looks like T.O. He's a young T.O. who, like T.O., dropped the ball a lot and still had some hand issues, but he runs after the catch like T.O. does. He doesn't have quite T.O.'s burning speed, but he's fast enough to be able to stretch that intermediate deep area, and they use him a lot as a short area player. They use him a little more as an H-back, which kind of drives me crazy because, yeah, he could play on the outside and give you kind of that T.O. light kind of vibe if they were to really focus on that. But coaches get their ideas, and they're like the husband in the car where the wife's going, the map says take a left, and they're like, I know where I was going. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I judge by landmarks, and the landmarks have changed. But meanwhile, they're stubbornly telling their wife, who knows better, how to get to the basically,
I've never
done Athens.
Yeah, so. I never do that. I never ever do that. What we need is ways for NFL coaches. Like we're all feeding into it. Like, don't make that play call. Like, this is the play call that's actually going to get you there and on schedule, on time. Quickly on the other side of that matchup. Do we go back to Kenyon Drake? Let's use Drake and the reference point of that Yeldon, Coleman, Lewis group. Is Drake clearly below, clearly above, or somewhere in the mix?
He's somewhere in the mix, but I'd say he's just below those guys. Mainly because he's going to have to split time with the old man, and the old man plays well. So that's he could have a bigger game than Gore. He could have a huge day. Kenyon Drake's the type of guy that with 10 carries can give you number one RB production for the week. The problem is that in those 10 carries, he can also give you number 58 running back production for the week. And if you're going to be a conservative player with all the options that are available right now, and some of them on the waiver wire, I would choose some of those guys like TJ Yeldon, or Tevin Coleman if you're in a shallow league, and pick those guys up.
So it's the arrowhead in the room. It's wonderful. No, and it's great. And we're going to talk about Josh Gordon too. And I it warms my heart to see you get exuberant about situations, and we can see the whole range. And the story's not over about Josh Gordon yet. Let me do Josh Gordon first, actually.
Okay.
But really, when we talk about Josh Gordon, I mean, one thing is like, don't drop him yet. If it's Dallas and San Francisco are the two names that Ian Rappaport mentioned. With San Francisco, you get a reunion with Kyle Shanahan. With Dallas, you get the instant number one receiver. I don't know about how Dak Prescott would work, but we can get into more. That's more of a Thursday night conversation or something that I'm sure that you may get into in the top in your weekly top 10 and things like that. But Antonio Callaway, Rashard Higgins, anything to see here?
Yeah, I mean, there's something to see here, but it's not something that if you put the name of Josh Gordon and put light next to it, or put any established player and put light next to it, you're making the mistake. You're making the mistake that it's actually even it's gonna resemble it enough to even put that first name in front of it. Rashard Higgins is that kind of guy. He's kind of like, how would I best put it? He's kind of like a Freddie Mitchell of of the Cleveland Browns. If you remember Freddie Mitchell, it's a situation where he's a good wide receiver who has talent to play in the NFL, and if he's set up in the right situations, he's going to make some big plays. But he's not going to be as consistent for you either year to year or maybe even game to game at this stage of what he does. And I think that it's mainly because he's not a physical marvel at the position. In that position, you either have to be put in a situation where you have to be a great route runner and a really good athlete on top of it, or have some redeeming athletic quality that really gives you an advantage. And Higgins is a guy who doesn't have a single athletic redeeming quality that gives him an advantage over a corner. So it's more about how they scheme him and him having to make tough plays on a pretty regular basis, or a lot of small plays, And I think that so he's a guy that I don't feel great about. He could maybe do it against New Orleans because it might be a shootout. If I can't even imagine the Browns in a shootout, actually right now. I mean,
that's like Kurt Russell in Little Big Trouble in Little China. He shoots the ceiling and it falls down on his head and knocks him out.
Listen, last week, Bloom, the first time I actually yelled like a Browns fan, like back, since I don't know, the early 90s, since the early 90s was when I saw Josh Gordon catch that touchdown pass. That was the last time I actually expressed emotion like I did as a Browns fan growing up, and didn't even think about it, But yeah, I just don't see it. And Antonio Callaway can give you the goods in terms of the athletic part. But again, if you look at the plays that he made, they were fairly simple routes during the preseason. They were back shoulder fades and they were slants. And that's basically what he ran. They're going to find some packages to do some things with him. So he's the one I'd probably play over Higgins, even though Higgins is going to collect more receptions. But I think he's that guy that everybody's going to be like, all the internet experts are going to come out and say, see, I was right about Rashard Higgins. And he's going to be that, 6 for 40 guy like every other week. And then and maybe a touchdown. And, by week 8, we're going to realize who he really is.
Yeah. And we love you, Harmon. Matt Harmon. That's
Yes.
that's not at all directed at Matt Harmon because we love.
Oh no,
we hold Matt Harmon dear to our heart. And it's great to see Smokey doing things. We got just like about 10 minutes left, so we'll try to touch on these things. So Kansas City, really for fantasy, the action questions are, do you have any? And Spencer Ware, I've got to mention for you, Matt. Spencer Ware looked like Spencer Ware.
Yeah.
So do we have any hesitation? You drafted Kareem Hunt in the top 12, top 15 picks, automatic start. Is he still an automatic start for this week? And then we'll see. And Sammy Watkins. Do you we've talked about so many receivers, there's so many guys you're thinking about this week, like Tyler Lockett and Brandon Marshall. We talked about Quincy Enunwa. I mean, even further down, someone like Dante Pettis or even Ted Ginn or so on. Roughly in this scale of like your wide receiver 3 flex types, where does Watkins fit in there based on what you observed in week 1?
I mean, look, I have Dante Pettis in a lot of leagues. I drafted him in pretty much every league and recommended to draft him at the end of the draft. And I'm still starting Watkins over guys like Pettis. Quincy Enunwa, I might start over Watkins, but we're treating him at around the same round value as Watkins in terms of where we drafted them. But I would not give up on Watkins or Kelsey or Hunt at all, because this was just 1 week where basically the Chargers didn't have Jason Verrett. The Kansas City Chiefs knew that, and Tyreek Hill is a guy that they couldn't cover. So it was like, when you have your fastest guy running wide open down the field, what are you going to do? So that was just the smart play. And I think that they tried to get those other guys going, but Mahomes was a little bit off target in those games. It's going to be a little bit more of a challenge with some of the Steelers zone blitz looks and some of the things that they're going to do in terms of disguises, where Mahomes will be challenged a little bit more. And we'll see if we get to see, I told you he's a gunslinger, Pat Mahomes type of things that people say when he throws multiple interceptions. There's a risk there that could happen this week. But I think that you're going to see more plays where they run some of these packages to, some of these bunch looks with fake screens, and then guys working off of it out of bunch sets, split out to one side of the field. And I think they played a little bit more of a conservative game plan to start the first week. And I think you're going to see them open it up a little bit more against Pittsburgh.
Oh, that's so exciting. The years and years we work together, and the years and years hopefully we do work together, Matt. I think this Pat Mahomes call is going to be one of the best calls of your career. I really do. No, I do. Because people are asking me, like, I got a question in my question thread over at Football Guys message board, like, what's the over under for Tyreek Hill touchdowns? And I thought about it, and well, I'll ask you that question, like, just instant. Like, what do you think if you had to set an over under for Tyreek Hill receiving tomorrow? I mean, for the year.
Oh, for the year. Wow. I would say it might be, 18.
Yeah, I said 14. But regardless, 14, 18 is usually like the leader in the season in receiving touchdowns.
Yeah.
And we're saying that's the over under, not the high end of outcomes.
Yeah.
And then someone asked me, can Pat Mahomes throw for 40 touchdowns this year?
Yes.
And I didn't even have to hesitate. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, sure he can. Like, that's not even like I have to think, but can? No, of course he can. And like you said, we may have not even seen the best of this offense yet. And that's the kind of thing for fantasy. It's so reminiscent. And I brought this up after the Mahomes to Hill, and I was texting back and forth with our mutual friend Eric Stoner, and he said it really was seismic, the Mahomes to Hill bomb in the preseason. It really was a plate tectonic shift, and the kind of thing in fantasy football that we have to take notice of. And I know that I invoked the 2007 Patriots a few times after I saw that play. Like, this might be a sign that we're going to see something that we didn't even contemplate, except if you're Matt Waldman. Matt Waldman was contemplating it. And then drafting with him in all these leagues, I can tell you he put his draft picks where his mouth is. Let's touch on a few of these situations before we fade out and go into the week 2 madness. Is it going to be a bounce back week for Amari Cooper? Do you lean towards benching him or playing him against Denver?
I've benched him against Denver in one of our leagues that we're in, and that's the only league that I have Cooper. I think that part of it was game planning more than anything last week with Gruden. They really were game planning with Cook. But he'll probably he's going to have a better day, but I don't know if it's going to be a good enough day. So I'm going to stay cautious with him unless I absolutely had to start him.
And do you think that coming out of this week, is it a buy low moment or is it a sell low moment with Amari Cooper?
I think it's a buy low moment. I think there's still going to be a little bit better things ahead here. I know that everyone's ready to bury the Raiders offense, but I think they actually played pretty well through three quarters. And if they had continued to run the ball a little bit more, where they had success doing that in the third quarter, I think that they could have kept this a close game, and we would have had a different outcome than what we saw with the Rams, kind of really pulling away quickly.
Okay, let's go over to the Tampa and Philadelphia game. Um, we've talked about these stunning week one outcomes, and maybe none was more stunning than what Tampa did down in New Orleans. However, what has left you with is maybe a lack of clarity at home against Philadelphia with plays like Deshaun Jackson. Didn't get to ask Dr. Gene about that, but he's going to play. Chris Godwin, who caught that red zone touchdown contested ball, as you in one of your bold predictions. That's exactly what lined up with that. Maybe
OJ
not playing
Howard.
OJ Howard. Yeah, well, in the tight end devastation landscape, OJ Howard is interesting. So yeah, any picks to click? Obviously, Mike Evans, Peyton Barber, who didn't get the touchdown but got the game script last week. How do we see? Because we're going to see this with both the stunning Jets outcome and the stunning Tampa outcome, where I've talked a lot this week, Matt, about second data points and how the second data point is going to give us context for the first data point. What kind of context do you think we're going to learn about the Tampa offense this week?
That they're going to spread the field this year, and that basically they're going to find mismatches with all of these athletic guys coming into their own. Mike Evans, you could actually say, is coming into his own because based on what I saw last year, I studied his tape this summer. And I got to be honest, he looked awful for a elite wide receiver last year. He did not look quick in and out of breaks. He did not look quick with his releases. He didn't play with an urgency or a speed that you'd want to see. He was undisciplined with all these little things that would cause him to really be a problem in the red zone in terms of how he performed. And that was as big of a problem for Tampa Bay's red zone attack as it was Jameis Winston, quote unquote, or their offense as a whole. He made a lot of mistakes. This whole summer and this last week, he looks like a different player. He's playing at a little bit of a different speed and a level of urgency and precision. So he's coming into his own. He's maturing and growing up. OJ Howard, they're trusting him more, and he's come into his own. He's studied, Kelsey and Tony Gonzalez and Zach Ertz this whole offseason, and they're mismatching him up against linebackers and letting him make catches on throws up the seam in ways that you would think Alabama would have done, but Alabama's like, we didn't have the core, we didn't have Tua yet to make those types of throws. So we're just going to throw you, high school type of routes and not give you those professional caliber type things. Now he's going to get those. Godwin obviously has come into his own, and when you put Deshaun Jackson in the slot, and he's kind of like the Ted Ginn of this offense. I mean, that's like 3 upgrades over Ted Ginn, putting him in that way. So I don't care if it's Ryan Fitzpatrick, Ryan Griffin, or Jameis Winston until we see that there's a difference enough and that this team isn't going to spread the field. I'm going to continue to count on them to do so, and I'm starting any receiver that I have in the Bucs offense that I drafted inside the 16th round probably at this point, because I believe that they're going to spread it out and find mismatches. And Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to be a surprising good player. And if they're on a winning streak, I wouldn't be shocked if Jameis Winston's like, just sit there and have some crab legs. It'll be fine.
Yeah, I like that. That's the quotable Matt Waldron right there. I don't care if it's Ryan Fitzpatrick or Ryan Griffin. And that really underscores what's interesting. Todd Monken, a name to remember here. Maybe it's his influence, him being in the kitchen, having a more prominent role. It's 10. I want to just do really quick rapid fire with you for the sake of it, because we've had 400 and even over 400 people all morning, Matt, which for this show is pushing higher than ever. So I want to deliver. So basically, let's just do a scale that is like cold, cool, lukewarm, warm, hot.
Okay.
On how you would be about playing these players today. Okay. Allen Robinson.
Who's he playing? I got to remember.
Seattle tomorrow night. With all they lost both their linebackers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I would say warm. I feel warm about that.
Okay. Trey Burton.
I would say also warm.
Brandon Marshall.
Whew, I'm gonna say lukewarm.
Tyler Lockett.
Lukewarm.
Jared Goff against Arizona.
Hot.
Larry Fitzgerald against the Rams.
Warm.
Matthew Stafford against San Francisco.
I'm gonna say hot because I think he's gonna bounce back.
So they're
and I'll give hot to Brandon Marshall too. Actually,
and
I'll go back.
Kenny Galladay.
I'm also gonna give him a hot.
If you had to choose, and I know this is gonna, I don't want to insult you. Okay, we're friends.
Okay.
We're friends. Okay. We're still friends. If you had to choose between Kenny Galladay and Marvin Jones today, I'm
going to go with Marvin Jones because he actually had about 3 chances to catch touchdowns that were difficult passes, and he almost came down with them. So I'm going to still give Marvin Jones the slightest edge because I'm biased.
Yeah, no, I understand. Philip Lindsay.
Lukewarm. Actually, cool. I'm going to say cool because I'm not a believer. I'm a believer in his talent, but not in really how they're going to use him. Danny Tucito did a great job of that in our roundtable this week to write about.
So this is the last one, and then we'll go off into the sunset. This one's fascinating because on one hand, you have it's like it's like coming into a fight, and like Cam Newton and the Panthers have like their arms in slings as they're missing their best guard. They're missing both of their tackles. But then Atlanta's missing Keanu Neal and Jones. So they're on crutches. So you have a fight between like a guy on crutches and a guy with both of his arms in slings.
You mean a barroom brawl with two drunks that couldn't be thrown out?
Right, like the Steelers Cleveland game last week. Exactly. So with all that,
people loved you. They thought you and I were fighting. There's somebody who tweeted, goes, "Please, Mom and Dad, stop fighting."
No, this is fun because it's Cleveland Pittsburgh. Folks have to know that when it's Cleveland Pittsburgh, we assume our archetypical roles.
Exactly.
And by the way, that's one of the most poignant emotional things that you finally like when the moment that finally revived your true fandom of the Browns was the swan song of Josh Gordon as a Cleveland Brown. I don't know how you could the universe's stories are so much better than anything we could pen. What kind of story do we pen about Cam Newton today in this situation?
Well, I mean, I think that we look at this and say he's the type of player that can create without an offensive line playing at its best capacity. So I don't see as huge of a difference between him now and after. I mean, I think that it's just more about can this offense get on the right page and do what it needs to do, and that involves its receivers and Cam Newton having that type
of Turner.
Yeah, Norv Turner. So you got So this is I would say Atlanta's going to rebound this week, and Tevin Coleman's going to have a big week. In fact, I mean, I've been kind of back and forth since we asked that Coleman Yeldon thing. I'd probably give Coleman the slightest edge over Yeldon.
Coleman, much like Sammy Watkins, has that really high end of range of outcomes every week.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it easier in the moment of truth to say, like, is TJ Yeldon going to have an 80-yard touchdown run? And I say that he's probably going to have one. Or Dion Lewis. Now we're hearing Blaine Gabbert's going to start, but Tevin Coleman, yes, you saw on that screen pass that they had set up to him that Matt Ryan did it. A lot of talk about Matt Ryan's bad throws last week. That was an outstanding improvisational throw.
And the best thing that Atlanta does is scheme to Tevin Coleman. Like if they schemed to the rest of their team the way they schemed to Tevin Coleman, this team would be unbeatable on offense. I mean, Mohamed Sanu. I just had somebody on my podcast last week. Drew Lieberman this past week, wide receiver coach, worked at Rutgers. Talk about he's worked with Mohamed Sanu so much and talks about what he is at the catch point and as a route runner. And I look at this team and I think, how come they're not using him that way then?
Yeah, well, so Steve Sarkisian, lots of offensive coordinators under the microscope this weekend too. Tonight, Scott Linehan, certainly Mike McCoy this afternoon. Brian Dable. And speaking of someone, if you want a totally unlikely name to catch a long touchdown this week, Robert Foster, who's going to get a chance at 3 wide sets. So somebody can run under those Josh Allen passes. It would be Robert Foster, and Robert Foster saying, "Why couldn't I play with Tua a little bit more? That would have been great. It would have been great. Maybe I would have got drafted." Folks, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity every week. The Audible, footballguys.com. Thank you for supporting footballguys.com. We hope we continue to deliver what you want, and it's just week 1, week 2, but we love this journey and we like winning and we like being right, but mostly we like the camaraderie and the shared journey of this community. It's a joy it's a privilege. So it's a privilege to get to enjoy an afternoon, an evening, and a Monday night of terrific NFL football and share how it slants through our brain with all of y'all and hear how it slants through your brain too. So good luck today. We'll see those inactives come in. And we'll be back. Cecil and I will be doing our recap tonight, and we'll start this whole thing over again for the next 4 months. It's beautiful. And it's beautiful because you're so very classy.